Back in 2019, I was deployed outside Kandahar when my husband called and told me our daughter was dead. I remember the wind first. That sounds strange, I know, but that's what stayed with me. Not his voice, not even the words at first. Just that dry Afghan wind pushing sand against the side of the building while I stood outside a logistics office with my phone pressed so hard to my ear, my fingers went numb. Daniel was crying. At least I thought he was crying. "Rachel," he said, and his voice kept breaking. "It's Emily. She's gone." I actually looked around like maybe somebody nearby had misunderstood something, and I was hearing the wrong conversation. That's how your mind protects you for about 3 seconds before the truth walks in and takes a chair. "What do you mean, gone?" I asked him. "She got sick fast. The flu turned into pneumonia. The doctors couldn't stop it." My daughter was 8 years old. 8. She had a gap between her front teeth, a purple backpack from Walmart, and a habit of sorting M&Ms by color before she ate them. She still slept with a stuffed rabbit named Captain Bun because I once joked he outranked everybody in the house. I said, "Put the doctor on the phone." Daniel went quiet. That silence was my first warning, but I was too far away and too scared to know what to do with it. "She's already been moved," he said. "Everything happened so fast. I don't remember hanging up." I remember my commander's face when I told him. I remember somebody putting a paper cup of coffee in my hand and me not drinking it. I remember arguing with people who were trying to help me because emergency leave was not instant magic no matter what civilians think. There were forms, approvals, transport schedules, weather delays, and a whole chain of people saying, "Captain Mercer, we're doing everything we can." I wanted to scream at all of them. Instead, I stood there like a good soldier and gave them the information they needed. Name Captain Rachel Mercer. Home of record, Knoxville, Tennessee. Dependent child, Emily Grace Mercer. Status deceased. That word looked obscene on paper. By the time I got back to Tennessee, the funeral was already over. Daniel picked me up at McGee-Tyson Airport in the same gray Ford F-150 he'd been driving for 6 years. He looked thinner. His beard was messy. His eyes were red around the edges. For one small second, when I saw him standing by baggage claim, I forgot all the bad years between us. The unpaid bills, the cold dinners, the way he made me feel guilty every time I deployed like I was choosing the army just to spite him. He opened his arms. I walked into them because I didn't know what else to do. "I'm sorry," he whispered into my hair. "I'm so sorry." "Where is she?" I asked. He pulled back. "Rachel, where is my daughter?" He looked at the floor. "At Maple Ridge Cemetery. My parents bought a plot near the old oak section." I stared at him. "You buried her before I got home." His jaw tightened like I had wounded him by asking. "The doctors said we shouldn't wait. They said the illness had affected her body." The funeral director agreed. "I didn't want you to see her like that." He said it softly. Like mercy. I heard it like theft. But I had been awake for almost 2 days. My knees were swollen from travel. My back hurt. And my brain felt packed with wet cotton. I had crossed half the world to get to my child, and he was telling me there was nothing left to reach. So I didn't fight the way people think mothers fight in stories. I folded. Daniel drove me home through Alcoa, past gas stations and strip malls and a church sign that said, "God is close to the brokenhearted." I remember hating that sign with a clean, sharp hate. When we pulled into our driveway, I sat there for a minute before I could open the truck door. Emily's bicycle was gone from the porch. Inside the house smelled like lemon cleaner, not home cleaner. Like somebody had tried to scrub grief off the walls before I arrived. I went straight to Emily's room. Her bed was made, two-made. The sheets tucked tight, stuffed animals arranged like a display. Her little desk was cleared except for a cup of colored pencils. Half her closet was empty. "Where are her clothes?" I asked. Daniel stood in the doorway, not coming in. "My mom helped pack some things. We thought it might be easier." "Easier for who?" He rubbed his face. "Please don't do this right now." I picked up Captain Bun from the pillow. His left ear was still stitched, crooked where Emily had tried to fix him herself with purple thread. That was when I finally cried. Not the pretty kind, not the movie kind. I made a sound I had never made before, and Daniel stepped toward me like he wanted to touch my shoulder. I told him not to. 2 weeks later, I filed for divorce. People thought it was grief. Some said I was making a mistake. A woman from church told me pain makes us push away the people we need most. I wanted to ask her if pain also made husbands sleep with dental hygienists named Trina while their wives were overseas, because that's how I found out. A receipt in Daniel's jacket pocket from a hotel off Cedar Bluff Road, 2 wine glasses charged to the room. His phone lighting up on the kitchen counter with a message that said, "Miss you already." I didn't scream. I didn't throw plates. I was too tired for theater. I put the receipt on the table and said, "I'll have my lawyer call you." Daniel cried again. By then, I trusted his tears about as much as I trusted a gas station sushi roll. The next year was strange. I moved into a small rental duplex near Fountain City because I couldn't stand the house. I stopped wearing my uniform unless I had to. My body changed after that deployment, and after the grief. I gained weight around my middle. My right knee clicked every time I climbed stairs. Sleep came in pieces. Some nights I woke up reaching for a child who wasn't there. Every Sunday when I could, I drove to Maple Ridge Cemetery. I brought flowers from Kroger because the florist downtown was too cheerful and too expensive. I sat on a little folding stool beside Emily's grave and talked to the headstone like it could pass messages along. I told her about the weather, about the neighbor's dog, about how I still couldn't make pancakes without burning the first one. I told her I was sorry more times than any person should say anything. One afternoon in late October, I was sitting there with a photo in my hand. It was my favorite one. Emily, wearing my patrol cap sideways, grinning like she had just conquered the United States Army. I heard leaves crunch behind me. I turned and saw a skinny little boy standing near the oak tree, maybe 8, maybe 9. Brown hair sticking up in the back, jeans too short at the ankles. He was staring at the picture. "You need something, sweetheart?" I asked. He shook his head, but he didn't leave. I was too worn down to be gentle. "Then why are you watching me?" He swallowed. His eyes went from the headstone to the photo and back again. Then he said so quietly, "I almost missed it, ma'am. That girl in your picture isn't dead." My hand went loose. The photo slipped from my fingers and landed face up in the grass. I stood so fast my bad knee sparked pain up my leg. "What did you say?" The boy took one step back, but he didn't run. He pointed at the picture. "That girl," he said. "She lives near my grandma's trailer." For a second, I thought I might grab that little boy by the shoulders and shake answers out of him. I didn't, but I wanted to. There's a kind of fear that comes out looking like anger, and mine had teeth on it. "What's your name?" I asked. He looked toward the cemetery road like he was considering running. "Caleb." "Caleb what?" "Caleb Brooks." I bent down and picked up the photo with hands that didn't feel like mine anymore. Emily's smile looked back at me from the glossy paper crooked cap and all. I held it out toward him. "Look at her again." He did. His face was serious in that way some kids get when life has made them older than they should be. "That's Emma," he said. "No." My voice came out too sharp. "Her name is Emily." Caleb flinched a little and guilt hit me right behind the ribs. He was just a child. He hadn't made the grave. He hadn't buried the coffin. He hadn't called me overseas and torn my life in half. I took a breath. "Sorry," I said. "I'm not mad at you." He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. I pointed at the headstone. "That is my daughter's name, Emily Grace Mercer. My husband told me she died last year. So, if you know something, Caleb, I need you to tell me exactly what you mean." He looked at the stone again, then back at the picture. "My grandma says not to get in grown folks' business," he said. "Your grandma sounds smart." "She is." "Then take me to her." That made him nervous. I could see it in the way he shifted his feet, one sneaker grinding into the damp grass. He wore a thin hoodie, even though the air had turned chilly, and the cuffs were stretched out like they'd been pulled over his hands too many times. "I don't know," he said. "She don't like surprise visitors. She'll like me less if I sit here guessing." That almost made him smile. Almost. He studied me for a few seconds. Maybe he saw the uniform habits I couldn't shake. The stiff posture, the direct eye contact. Maybe he just saw a tired woman standing beside a child's grave holding a picture like it was the last board in a flood. Finally, he said, "It's not far, but you got to drive slow. The road's got potholes bad enough to swallow a tire." I followed him in my Jeep out of Maple Ridge Cemetery and down a 2-lane road lined with bare trees and old farm fences. He rode his bike ahead of me at first, then got tired and loaded it into the back. I should have been worried about how strange it looked, a grown woman leaving a cemetery with some boy she'd just met. But grief makes rules feel far away. Caleb sat in the passenger seat with his hands folded tight in his lap, giving directions like a little old man. "Turn after the Baptist church." "Not this one." The next one with the sign that's missing the T. We passed a Dollar General, a closed-down auto parts store, and a barbecue place with smoke rolling out back. East Tennessee in late October has a way of looking worn and beautiful at the same time. Brown hills, red leaves, old pickup trucks, porches full of things people meant to fix. The trailer park sat outside Oakage, tucked behind a gravel road that looked like the county forgot it owned. There were rusted mailboxes at the entrance, a few plastic Halloween pumpkins on steps, and one sad, inflatable ghost collapsed in somebody's yard like it had given up. Caleb pointed to a beige single-wide with blue shutters. That's Grandma's. A woman stood on the porch before I even shut off the engine. She was small but solid, wrapped in a faded University of Tennessee sweatshirt, gray hair pinned up any kind of way. One hand rested on a cane, but her eyes were strong enough to make the cane feel decorative. "Caleb," she called. "You better have a real good reason for bringing the army to my door." He looked at me. "She's not the army. She's Rachel." I stepped out slowly, hands visible like I was approaching a checkpoint instead of a porch. "Ma'am," I said. "Rachel Mercer." "Wanda Brooks," she said. "And I know who you are." The world tilted a little. I held up the photo. "Then you know why I'm here." Wanda looked at it and something in her face changed. Not surprise, more like the face of someone who'd been waiting for a storm and finally saw the clouds arrive. She opened the screen door. "Come in before the whole park starts watching. Folks around here can smell trouble like bacon." Inside smelled like coffee, Vicks, Vapo Rub, and fried onions. The living room was small, clean, and crowded with life. Crocheted blankets, school papers on the coffee table, a stack of library books, a TV playing a judge show with the volume low. Wanda moved slowly, her hips stiff. I noticed the swelling in her knuckles when she reached for the back of a chair. "Arthritis," she said, catching me looking. "Don't get old unless you've got a sense of humor and a good heating pad." I sat because my legs were starting to feel unreliable. Caleb stood by the hallway watching both of us. Wanda lowered herself into a recliner with a tired sigh. "The girl calls herself Emma. She's Emily," I said. "I figured that out." "How?" Wanda nodded toward the hallway. "Kids talk in their sleep when they're scared." She said Mommy and Rachel more than once. She said Fort Campbell, too. I didn't know what all of it meant. My throat tightened. "Where is she?" "At school right now. Bus will be here in about 20 minutes. I almost stood. Wanda lifted one finger. "Sit down." I stared at her. She didn't blink. "You may outrank me somewhere else," she said, "but not in my living room. Under different circumstances." I might have laughed, maybe even liked her right away, but my skin felt too tight for humor. She leaned forward, both hands on her cane. Nearly a year ago, Caleb and I found a little girl behind Ruthie's diner after closing. January cold, no coat worth naming, fever so bad she was shaking. She said some church people had taken her someplace and she ran. She was scared of cars, men, offices, phones, just about everything. I whispered, "Why didn't you call the police?" "I did. That stopped me." Wanda's mouth tightened. Deputy came. Child gave a false name because she'd been told her mother didn't want her, and her father was the only one handling things. Paperwork got confusing. Then the church program claimed she was in their care. I didn't trust the smell of it. "So you kept her." "I kept her alive." Her voice didn't rise, but the words landed hard. "There's a difference." I looked down at my hands. My fingernails had dug little half-moons into my palms. Before I could answer, a school bus squealed outside. Caleb ran to the window. "She's here," he said. Everything inside me went quiet. A few seconds later, the front door opened. Small footsteps. A backpack dropped with a soft thump. Then she appeared in the doorway. My daughter, thinner, longer hair, a face that had learned caution. But my daughter, she held a worksheet in one hand and a little paper bag in the other. Her eyes moved from Wanda to Caleb, then to me. She froze. I couldn't breathe. "Emily," I said. Her bottom lip trembled, but she didn't come closer. Behind her left ear, just above the curve of her jaw, was the tiny brown birthmark I used to kiss when she was a baby. She looked at me like I was a dream she didn't trust. "Mommy," she whispered. I took one step forward and stopped because she stepped back. That hurt worse than I can explain. I crouched right there in Wanda Brooks' living room, my bad knee protesting, my heart beating so hard I felt it in my teeth. "Baby, I didn't leave you," I said. "I thought you were gone." Emily's eyes filled. but she held herself stiff as a board. "They said you picked the army," she said. "They said you didn't want me anymore because I was too much trouble." "No," I said, and my voice cracked. "No, baby." She looked at Wanda, then back at me. And then she asked the question that still wakes me up some nights. "Mommy, why did you leave me with the church people?" I reached for her slow, giving her time to refuse me. She let me touch her hand, but she didn't hug me back. I stayed at Wanda Brooks's kitchen table until after midnight. Not because anybody asked me to, because I couldn't make myself leave. Emily had gone to bed in the small back room Wanda had fixed up for her. Pink blanket, thrift store lamp, a little plastic dresser with one drawer that didn't close right. Caleb had given her the top bunk even though he complained about it like an old man being taxed by the government. "She kicks in her sleep," he told me, standing in the hallway with a toothbrush in his mouth. Wanda said, "Boy, go brush," instead of narrating. That was the first time I almost smiled. Almost. I sat at the table with a mug of coffee I didn't drink, listening to Wanda tell me what she knew. Some of it came in pieces. Some of it she only understood later. Emily had been brought to a church-linked children's program called New Harbor Family Outreach about 40 minutes outside Knoxville. On paper, it claimed to help troubled minors from unstable homes. That phrase made my stomach twist. Unstable home. My daughter had a mother in the United States Army, and a bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. She had a dentist appointment scheduled for March, and a library card with overdue Junie B. Jones books, but somebody had written unstable home on a form and a room full of adults had accepted it because the paperwork looked official. Wanda slid a folder across the table. "I kept copies of everything I could," she said. I opened it carefully. Clinic receipts. School enrollment papers under the name Emma Miller. A note from a deputy who had come by once and never followed up. A crumpled flyer from New Harbor with smiling children on the front. And a Bible verse printed in blue ink. "You kept all this." Wanda shrugged. "I was a waitress for 43 years. You learn to save receipts when men start talking too smooth." That time I did smile just a little, but it faded when I saw the intake date on the flyer. January 18th. Emily's supposed funeral had been January 15th. 3 days. Daniel had buried an empty story and moved our child into a program before I even made it back across the ocean. I went cold all over. Wanda saw it. "You need somebody who knows how to dig without making noise." "I know someone," I said. The next morning, I called Marcus Vega. Marcus and I had served together at Fort Campbell years earlier. Back then he was Army C, the kind of man who noticed everything and smiled at almost nothing. He retired with a bad shoulder, a ruined marriage, and the moral patience of a man who had spent too many years watching people lie badly. He answered on the third ring. "Mercer," he said. "This better not be a butt dial." "Marcus," I said, "I found Emily." There was no joke after that, only silence. Then he said, "Start from the beginning, slow." So I did. I told him about the phone call in Afghanistan, the funeral. I never saw the grave. Caleb, Wanda, Emily, standing in that trailer doorway looking at me like love was a trick. Marcus didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he let out a long breath. "Do not confront Daniel," he said. "I wasn't planning to." "You were absolutely planning to." I hated that he knew me. "I want to go over there and put his face through his own front door." "I'm sure that would feel meaningful for about 15 seconds, Marcus said. "Then he'd call you unstable, angry, traumatized from deployment, and half the town would believe him because people love an easy label." I closed my eyes. He was right. That was the worst part. What do? You document, you breathe, you keep your daughter safe, and you let me make some calls. Marcus drove down from Kentucky the next day in an old black Chevy Tahoe with a cracked windshield and a gas station coffee in each cup holder. He hugged me once, hard and quick, then got straight to work at Wanda's kitchen table. For 3 days, we built a timeline. Not a dramatic one, a real one. The kind made of boring things that ruin criminals. Dates, signatures, receipts, phone records, county filings, hospital gaps. The first problem was the hospital. Daniel had told me Emily died at Parkage Children's after complications from the flu, but Marcus had an old contact who confirmed something careful and unofficial. Emily Mercer had no full admission record there for that week. There was an urgent care visit listed under her name, but no ICU transfer, no death record, no attending physician assigned to a deceased child. "That doesn't happen by accident," Marcus said. Then came the funeral home. Holloway and Sons Funeral Services had handled the burial, closed casket, private service. Daniel signed nearly everything. The death certificate listed a doctor whose signature looked wrong, even to me, and I was not a handwriting expert. Marcus tapped the copy with one thick finger. See this? 2. Clean? Real doctors sign like they're escaping a fire. Wanda snorted from the stove. That's the truth. My doctor signs like a chicken fell in ink. I needed the laugh. It passed through the room and left us breathing again. But the deeper we dug, the worse it got. My father had left a small trust for Emily before he died. Nothing huge by rich people's standards, but enough to matter to a man with gambling debt. There was also a piece of land outside Emville, 12 acres my father always called someday money. Emily was named as beneficiary after me. While I was deployed, Daniel had used an old power of attorney form I'd signed years earlier for household emergencies. He stretched it, twisted it, and paired it with false documents claiming Emily had died and that I was emotionally unfit to manage affairs from overseas. Marcus found one petition filed in county court, "Mother unavailable due to military deployment." Another line said, "Mother voluntarily relinquished contact." I read that sentence 5 times. Then I stood up, walked outside Wanda's trailer, and threw up behind a rusted lawn chair. When I came back in, Marcus didn't offer comfort. He knew better. He just handed me a paper towel and said, "Now you understand what we're dealing with." I wiped my mouth. He told her I gave her up. Yes. He put that on paper. Yes. And people believed it. Marcus looked tired. People believe paper faster than women. Especially tired women. Especially angry ones. That landed hard because I had spent my whole adult life proving I could be calm, competent, and useful in rooms full of men who thought volume was leadership. Now my own husband had used that same discipline against me. If I acted too quiet, I was cold. If I acted too furious, I was unstable. If I cried, I was broken. If I didn't, I was heartless. Marcus saw my face and leaned forward. "Rachel, listen to me. You're a soldier. Act like one. Don't fire until you know where the target is." That became the rule. We kept digging. New Harbor Family Outreach had taken Emily under a false identity. Their records described her as withdrawn, defiant, and abandoned by maternal parent. There were other children listed in similar language. A boy from Clarksville, 2 sisters from Chattanooga, all from families dealing with divorce, deployment, or custody fights. Not trafficking. I don't use that word lightly, but it was a dirty pipeline, a quiet one, the kind that hides behind charity dinners and polished church bulletins. That night, after Emily fell asleep, I sat beside her bed. She had one hand tucked under her cheek. Her face looked younger in sleep, almost like before. I wanted to promise her everything would be fixed. But grown people had already hurt her with promises, so I whispered something smaller. "I'm here." Then my phone buzzed. Marcus had sent one scanned document. Daniel's signature sat at the bottom. Above it, in neat black type, was the line I knew I would never forget. "Mother voluntarily relinquished contact." I stared at those words until they blurred. Then I saved the file in 3 different places. The first time I sat across from Daniel after finding Emily, I nearly ruined everything. That's the truth. People love revenge stories where the hero stays cool and says clever things while dramatic music plays somewhere in the background. Real life is mostly trying not to throw mashed potatoes at somebody in a Cracker Barrel. Daniel called me 3 days after Marcus uncovered the trust paperwork. I was standing in Wanda's kitchen making boxed macaroni for Emily and Caleb when my phone lit up with his name. Just seeing it made my shoulders tighten. Wanda glanced over from the recliner. "That him?" "Yeah. You going to answer?" I looked down the hallway toward Emily's room. She was doing homework at the little folding table Wanda kept by the window, tongue sticking out slightly while she wrote. Same way she used to when spelling got difficult. "I have to," I said. Wanda nodded once. "Then remember who he is before he starts acting like who he pretends to be." I stepped outside onto the porch before answering. Rachel, Daniel said softly, "God." He sounded tired. Not guilty. Tired. "There's a difference." "Hey," I said. "You okay?" That almost made me laugh. "No," I told him. "Not really." He sighed into the phone like we were still a team carrying the same grief. "I've been thinking about you," he said. I leaned against the porch railing. Across the trailer park, somebody was grilling burgers. Country music drifted from a nearby truck radio. "What do you want, Daniel?" A pause, then carefully. I hate how things ended between us. There it was. Not Emily. Not our daughter. Us. Marcus had warned me Daniel would eventually circle back once he thought enough time had passed, especially if he suspected money was involved. People like Daniel always thought they were smarter than consequences. I've been thinking too, I said. That perked him up immediately. I was hoping maybe we could talk. I looked through the screen door. Emily was laughing quietly at something Caleb said. Every instinct in my body wanted to tell Daniel exactly where she was. Instead, I said maybe. That word bought us dinner at Cracker Barrel 2 nights later, the one off Interstate 40 near Farragut. I got there early because I needed time to settle myself. My stomach had been bad all day. Too much coffee, not enough sleep, too much rage packed into one human body. The hostess sat me near the fireplace. Around me were older couples eating chicken and dumplings, tourists buying candy by the register, a little girl begging her grandfather for a stuffed bear. Normal life. That was the strange thing about betrayal. The world kept ordering sweet tea while your own life turned radioactive. Daniel arrived wearing a navy quarter-zip sweater I bought him years ago from Bass Pro Shops. Seeing him in it nearly knocked the air out of me. He slid into the seat across from me slowly like he was approaching a wounded animal. "You look tired," he said. I almost replied, "So does a graveyard," but I held it in. Instead, I shrugged. "It's been a rough year." His eyes softened in a way that would have fooled me once. "I know." "No, you don't," I thought. The waitress came over with menus. Daniel ordered meatloaf and sweet tea. Same thing he always ordered. I got coffee because my stomach already hated me enough. For a few minutes, we talked like divorced people, pretending not to remember why they divorced. Work, weather, traffic on Kingston Pike. Finally, Daniel rubbed his hands together and said, "I miss her every day." I stared at him right there, that moment. That was when I realized something important. Daniel believed his own performance. Maybe not completely. Maybe not deep down where rotten things live, but enough to survive inside it. Enough to sit under fake antique signs in a Cracker Barrel and talk about my daughter like she was dead while she colored pictures 40 minutes away. "You ever think about moving back into the house?" he asked. I blinked. "What?" "The duplex can't be easy. You shouldn't be alone right now." There was concern in his voice. Manufactured, measured, like a salesman leaning into a warranty pitch. "I'm managing." He nodded slowly. "I know the divorce got ugly. Ugly. That word did something to me. Not the affair, not the fake paperwork. Ugly. I suddenly saw every version of my life with him all at once. Every deployment where he made me feel guilty for leaving. Every promotion he quietly resented. Every time I apologized for succeeding because it made him uncomfortable. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Daniel kept talking. "I just think grief made us both act out. Act out. Like I keyed his truck instead of burying my child." I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. Daniel startled. "Rachel, I need the restroom." I walked away before my temper outran my brain. Inside the bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and threw up hard enough my ribs hurt. Afterward, I sat there breathing through my nose, staring at the beige tile wall. 42 years old, 2 deployments, bad knee, 20 pounds heavier than I used to be, and hiding in a Cracker Barrel bathroom trying not to commit a felony over biscuits and gravy. I started laughing. Not happy laughter, the kind people do right before they either heal or lose their minds completely. When I finally looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My face looked older than it had a year earlier. There were deep lines around my mouth now. My hair was pulled back too tight. I looked like somebody who had survived something ugly. Good. Survival was useful. I washed my hands, fixed my expression, and went back out there. Daniel smiled carefully when I sat down. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly, "but I'm trying." That seemed to relax him. People love honesty when they think it benefits them. Dinner came. We picked at food neither of us wanted. Then Daniel started talking too much. That happens when liars think they're winning. He mentioned legal bills. He mentioned Trina's mistakes. Then he made the mistake Marcus had hoped for. He leaned back inside. Emily would have forgotten most of this eventually anyway. The world narrowed. I kept my voice calm. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Kids move on. They adapt." There it was. Not grief, not regret. Management. He was talking about my daughter like an inconvenience that had almost become manageable. Under the table, my phone recorded every word. Daniel took another sip of tea. I know you probably hate me, he said, but I did what I thought was best at the time. I looked him directly in the eyes. For who? For 1 second, something cold moved behind his face. Then it disappeared. That scared me more than yelling would have. When dinner ended, Daniel insisted on paying. Out in the parking lot, the Tennessee air had turned cold enough to bite. He stood beside my Jeep with his hands in his pockets. I miss you sometimes, he said quietly. I looked at him. The man who buried paperwork. The man who signed forms while our daughter cried for me somewhere else. And I realized something that surprised even me. I didn't miss him at all. Not one bit. I drove straight back to Wanda's trailer. Inside, Emily was asleep on the couch with Captain Bun tucked under one arm. Caleb had found the rabbit at a church donation bin 2 months earlier and brought it home because Emma got weird sad when she saw it. I stood there staring at that crooked stuffed rabbit while Wanda lowered the TV volume. How'd dinner go? She asked. I held up my phone. Good enough. Then my phone buzzed again. Marcus. I answered immediately. You need to come downtown tomorrow, he said. Why? A pause. Because somebody tried to burn a storage unit connected to Daniel's church friend. I went still. What survived? Marcus exhaled slowly. Enough. The storage unit sat behind a pawn shop and a payday loan place off Clinton Highway. That told me almost everything I needed to know before I even got out of the Jeep. Marcus was already there when I arrived the next morning, leaning against his Tahoe with a paper cup of gas station coffee in one hand. Yellow police tape fluttered around the row of units, while 2 fire investigators moved in and out carrying plastic bins. The air smelled like wet ash and melted rubber. Marcus handed me a second coffee. You look terrible, he said. Good morning to you, too. You sleep at all? I stared toward the burned unit. Not really. Yeah, me neither. That was the closest thing Marcus gave to sympathy most days. He nodded toward the fire marshal. Small fires started intentionally. Somebody used lighter fluid and panicked halfway through. Trina, most likely. I crossed my arms against the cold. You sure? Marcus gave me a look. Rachel. Innocent people don't usually set paperwork on fire at 3:00 the morning. Faire point. One investigator stepped out, carrying a warped cardboard box, sealed inside an evidence bag. Marcus lowered his voice. Most of the paper was damaged, but whoever did it wasn't careful enough. Fire destroys edges first. Sometimes the middle survives. I thought about Daniel sitting across from me at Cracker Barrel talking about adaptation like he was discussing cable bills. Something hard settled deeper inside me. Not rage exactly. Clarity. Marcus and I spent the next 2 hours reviewing what investigators had recovered. Some documents were useless now, burned black around the corners. Ink melted into gray smears, but enough remained to paint the picture. False intake forms, temporary guardianship paperwork, financial transfers linked to New Harbor Family Outreach, and then there was the photo. The second Marcus handed it to me. My chest tightened so fast I thought I might pass out. Emily sat in a folding chair inside what looked like a church office. Metal desk, cheap beige walls, one fake plant in the corner. Her backpack rested beside her feet. She looked terrified. Not crying, worse, quiet. Daniel stood in the background signing something while a woman I recognized from New Harbor smiled at him. The timestamp was January 16th, one day after my daughter's funeral. I stared at the image so long Marcus finally touched my arm. Rachel, she was alive. I whispered. I know. He knew she was scared. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. I slid the photo back into the evidence sleeve carefully, like touching it too hard might hurt her all over again. By the time I got back to Wanda's trailer that afternoon, I was running on caffeine and fury. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor doing math homework with Caleb. The TV played some loud cartoon in the background. For one strange second, the normally of it nearly broke me harder than the evidence had. My daughter should have been complaining about multiplication tables this whole time. Instead, she'd spent a year believing her mother abandoned her. Wanda noticed my face immediately. You find something bad. I handed her the copy of the photo. She looked at it once and muttered, Lord, help me. I might actually go to jail before I die. Caleb peeked over her shoulder. That's Mr. Daniel. Emily froze. Not dramatically. Not movie style. Her pencil just stopped moving. Slowly, she looked up at me. You saw Daddy? The words still came naturally to her. That hurt, too. I sat down carefully across from her. Yeah, baby. I saw him. She stared at the carpet. Is he mad? No. That answer came too fast. We both knew it. Emily twisted the edge of her sleeve around her finger. At the church place, she said quietly. They told me Daddy was fixing paperwork so I could stay somewhere safe. My jaw tightened. What church place? She shrugged one shoulder. The white building. Kids remember feelings before addresses. I softened my voice. Did anybody hurt you there? Emily thought about it. No, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But they yelled a lot, she added. And they locked the pantry at night because some kids stole food. Wanda closed her eyes briefly. Emily kept talking in that careful little voice children use when they're trying not to upset adults. One lady said, "Military moms don't stay," she said. Eventually, they all leave. I looked down at my hands before Emily could see my face crack open. Because here's the ugly truth nobody likes saying out loud. Part of Emily had believed it because I had been gone a lot. Not abandoned her gone, but gone enough for a scared child to wonder sometimes. Deployments, trainings, late-night calls, missed birthdays, video chats, freezing, and bad Wi-Fi zones halfway across the world. I served my country proudly. But pride doesn't erase absence. That realization sat heavy in my chest while Emily quietly erased a math problem too hard enough to tear the paper. Later that night, after the kids went to sleep, Marcus came by again. He spread documents across Wanda's kitchen table while she made coffee strong enough to remove paint. We're close, he said, to charges to pressure. He pointed at a series of bank records tied to Daniel and New Harbor. Small transfers, not huge amounts, just enough to look charitable unless somebody lined up all the dates. Payments before Emily's intake. Payments after legal filings. One transfer from Trina. Marcus tapped the table. People get sloppy when they think nobody's watching. Wanda snorted and stupid when they think they're smarter than women. Marcus actually smiled at that. A rare event. We need one clean public hit. He said something undeniable. I leaned back in the chair. My knee throbbed from the cold weather. What's Daniel doing this weekend? Marcus lit another flyer toward me. A church charity banquet. Fundraiser dinner for vulnerable children and family outreach services. Guest speaker, Daniel Mercer. I laughed before I could stop myself. Not happy laughter. Just disbelief at the nerve of evil sometimes. He's fundraising off this, I asked. Looks like Wanda read the flyer and muttered. Oh, I am absolutely wearing my good earrings for this nonsense. For the first time in weeks, I felt something besides grief. Purpose. Not revenge yet. Closer to aim. The banquet was scheduled for Saturday night at a church event hall outside Knoxville. Local business owners, church donors, community people, the exact kind of room where Daniel loved pretending to be respectable. Marcus looked at me carefully. You sure you can stay controlled? I thought about Cracker Barrel, about throwing up in the bathroom because I hated my ex-husband enough to scare myself. Then I thought about Emily asleep in the next room with one hand still clutching that stuffed rabbit. Yes, I said quietly. This time I meant it. Marcus gathered the papers into neat stacks. Good, he said, because Saturday night we bury his version of the story. Saturday night came cold and clear. East Tennessee skies get sharp in November, the kind of cold that sneaks through denim and settles into your joints. By the time I parked outside Fellowship Community Church, my knee already HD hard enough to make me limp. Wanda noticed immediately. You walking like that because you're nervous? She said, climbing carefully out of my Jeep. Or because you're old? Both. That's fair. She adjusted her pearl earrings in the side mirror like we were headed to bingo instead of a public destruction. The church banquet hall glowed warm against the dark parking lot. Minivans, pickup trucks, Christmas wreath, already hanging too early on the front doors. Through the windows, I could see round tables with white tablecloths and centerpieces made from fake pine cones and battery candles. Normal. That word kept bothering me through this whole thing. Everything looked normal. That's how bad people survive so long. Marcus arrived separately with 2 investigators from the state. Plain clothes, quiet faces, the kind of people who didn't need to announce authority because they carried it naturally. You ready? Marcus asked me. No. Good. Means you still have a conscience. Inside the banquet smelled like coffee-baked ham and cheap perfume. Around 60 people filled the room, mostly older church couples, a few local business owners, women carrying casserole energy, and men who wore jackets they only pulled out for funerals and weddings. A piano version of Amazing Grace played softly through ceiling speakers. Daniel stood near the stage, laughing with the pastor. For one brief second, seeing him smiling almost knocked me sideways. Not because I missed him, because I finally understood how completely he had separated himself from what he'd done. He saw himself as the victim now. That realization chilled me more than the weather outside. Trina spotted me first. Her face lost color immediately. She wore a bright red dress that looked too young for her and clutched a wine glass like it was emotional support equipment. Daniel turned. Our eyes met across the room. I watched confusion hit him first, then panic, then calculation. Always calculation. He excused himself from the pastor and walked toward me carefully. "Rachel," he said quietly. "I didn't know you were coming. I got invited." Not technically true, but neither was his entire personality. Wanda moved beside me like a tiny old bodyguard in orthopedic shoes. Daniel glanced at her. "Who's this?" "The reason your tires are still inflated?" Wanda said. I almost smiled. Almost. Daniel looked back at me, trying to recover his rhythm. "Can we talk privately?" "No." That answer landed harder than shouting would have. People nearby started noticing tension. Conversations softened around us the way they do before storms. Daniel lowered his voice. "Rachel, whatever this is, now's not the time." I looked around the banquet hall, at the smiling church volunteers, at the donation jars, at the little paper angels hanging from the walls with children's names written on them. "It's exactly the time," I said. Before he could answer, the pastor stepped to the microphone. "Good evening, everybody." The room settled. Daniel stared at me one more second, then forced on his public face and walked toward the stage. I sat beside Wanda near the back. Marcus stayed standing along the wall with the investigators. And then the performance began. The pastor talked about service, community, helping vulnerable children, families in crisis. Every word made my skin crawl worse. Then he introduced Daniel. People applauded. My ex-husband walked onto that stage wearing a navy blazer and a smile polished smooth as riverstone. "Thank you," he said warmly. "The last year has taught me a lot about loss." I nearly laughed out loud at the nerve. Daniel spoke for several minutes about grief, resilience, faith, and caring for children who needed guidance. He sounded sincere. That was the terrifying part because good liars always do. Then he said something that finally made my hands stop shaking. Sometimes God asks us to endure unimaginable pain so we can become better servants to others. That was enough. I looked at Marcus. He nodded once. The pastor stepped back toward the sound table, confused when Marcus intercepted him quietly and handed over paperwork from the investigators. A few seconds later, the microphone squealed. Daniel frowned. Then the recording started playing through the banquet hall speakers. His own voice filled the room. She was easier to manage once Rachel was overseas. Silence slammed across the tables. Daniel went white. The recording continued. "She'll adapt. Kids always adapt." A woman near the front slowly lowered her fork. Another clip. "If Emily stays hidden long enough, Rachel won't question the trust paperwork." Now people were staring openly. Daniel stumbled toward the sound table. "Turn that off. Too late." Another recording. His voice again. "Rachel cared more about the army than motherhood anyway." The room changed after that. Not loudly, quietly. That was worse. Older people stopped eating. Church donors looked at each other with the expression people get when betrayal enters the room wearing familiar clothes. One elderly woman stood up slowly and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I gave money to this." Trina backed toward the exit. Marcus intercepted her gently but firmly. Daniel spotted the investigators, and panic finally cracked through his performance. "This is out of context," he snapped. "Rachel's unstable. She's been through combat stress." That was when I stood up. Not dramatic, not screaming, just unhiding. The room fell silent as I walked toward the stage. My knee hurt with every step. Good. I wanted to feel this moment honestly. Daniel stared at me like he no longer recognized the woman approaching him. Maybe he didn't. I took the microphone from the stand. "You buried my daughter on paper," I said calmly. "You told this town she was dead. You told her I abandoned her while I was fighting overseas. Nobody moved. Nobody even coughed." I looked directly at Daniel. "But you forgot something. She was alive." Right then, the back doors opened. Wanda stepped inside, holding Emily's hand. Caleb followed behind them. The sound that moved through the room wasn't loud, just shock spreading person to person. Daniel physically staggered backward. Emily looked smaller under all those eyes, but she kept walking. I crouched beside her. "You don't have to say anything," I whispered. Emily looked at Daniel for a long moment. Then she spoke softly into the silence. "You told me my mama didn't want me anymore. That did it. Not the recordings. Not the investigators." That sentence broke him because suddenly everybody in that banquet hall could see exactly what he was. Daniel tried one last time. "She's confused," he said desperately. Wanda stepped forward so fast I barely saw her move. "Boy," she snapped, "I have lived 70 years, and this ain't confusion. This is you getting caught." Then she smacked him across the shoulder with her purse. The sound echoed through the hall like a gunshot wrapped in leather. Half the room gasped. One man near the buffet actually muttered, "Damn." Honestly, I think that saved the tension from turning too dark. Police moved in immediately after. One officer guided Daniel's hands behind his back, while another read him his rights. Trina started crying near the doorway, insisting she didn't know everything. Nobody looked interested in comforting her. I stood there holding Emily's hand while cameras from somebody's phone recorded the end of my marriage forever. And the strange thing was, I didn't feel victorious, just tired. Deep down tired, the kind that settles into your bones after carrying grief too long. Outside in the parking lot, cold air hit us hard after the overheated banquet hall. Emily climbed into the passenger seat of my Jeep quietly. I sat behind the steering wheel, but couldn't start the engine yet because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. For a minute, neither of us spoke. Then Emily leaned against my arm carefully. "Can we go home now?" she whispered. And for the first time in over a year, I finally knew where home was. The months after Daniel's arrest did not feel like the ending people imagine. There was no clean line where pain stopped and peace began. There were court dates, interviews, school meetings, therapy appointments, and stacks of paperwork that made my kitchen table look like a law office had exploded on it. Daniel faced charges for fraud, false documentation, illegal child placement, financial exploitation, and child endangerment. Trina cooperated because people like Trina always discover morals right around the time handcuffs appear. I stopped caring about every detail of their punishment, not because I forgave them, because Emily still needed breakfast. That sounds small, but it wasn't. For a long time, revenge had given me direction. Wake up, gather evidence, protect Emily, expose Daniel, keep moving. Then one morning, there was no banquet to prepare for, no recording to hide, no Daniel to outsmart, just me standing in a small kitchen, staring at a lunchbox, trying to remember whether my daughter liked mustard. I made her sandwich wrong the first week she came home with me. She opened the bread, saw the crust still on, and went quiet. I said, "I messed that up, didn't I?" She nodded carefully like she was afraid the truth might hurt my feelings. "I used to cut it off," I said. "You did?" I took the sandwich back and cut the crust off right there on the counter. She watched me like I was passing a test I should have never failed. That was motherhood after trauma. Not big speeches, just crusts, just showing up again the next morning. I medically retired from the army that spring. My right knee had been bad for years. My lower back was worse, and sleep had turned into a negotiation I usually lost. The official paperwork listed physical limitations and stress-related symptoms. It did not say this woman got her child back and finally understood she could not keep serving everybody else first, but that would have been more honest. I sold the old house Daniel and I had lived in. Too many ghosts, too much lemon cleaner, too many rooms where I had once mistaken silence for stability. Emily and I moved into a modest brick ranch house closer to Wanda's trailer park. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a maple tree out front, and a neighbor named Mr. Pritchard who mowed his lawn at 7, 15 every Saturday morning like America depended on it. Wanda approved. "This house don't echo," she said the first time she walked in. "That's your official inspection, that and the water pressure. You passed both." Caleb came over most Saturdays. He and Emily built forts in the living room and ate more pizza rolls than any doctor would recommend. Wanda sat in my recliner with a heating pad on her hips and criticized game shows like she was personally responsible for the contestants' poor choices. Slowly, our life got ordinary, beautifully ordinary. Emily started sleeping with her door open instead of closed. Then halfway open, then closed, but not locked. She stopped hiding crackers under her pillow. She started leaving drawings on the fridge. One day, while looking for her sneakers, she yelled from the hallway, "Mom, have you seen my blue shoes?" I froze with a dish towel in my hand. She didn't notice. That was the gift. She hadn't planned it, hadn't forced herself. The word just came back on its own like a bird returning to a porch after a long winter. I went into the laundry room and cried into a basket of towels for about 2 minutes. Then I found the shoes. Healing was not pretty all the time. Some nights Emily woke up crying. Some days she got angry at me for leaving the room too long. Sometimes I got impatient and hated myself for it. I had led convoys through hostile roads, but helping with third-grade math nearly broke me twice. Still, we kept going. Therapy helped. Time helped. Wanda helped more than she knew. One afternoon, I told her I still felt guilty. She was sitting on my porch shelling peas into a metal bowl, her swollen fingers moving slower than they used to. "Of course you do," she said. "That's your comfort. That's the truth." Guilt shows up when love had nowhere to go. But don't build it a guest room. I thought about that for a long time. Eventually, Emily asked to visit the cemetery. I didn't want to go, but I said yes because boundaries didn't mean hiding from hard things. They meant choosing how to face them. We went on a clear Sunday afternoon. Same cemetery, same old oak section, same gravel road crunching under my tires. The headstone was still there then, but not for long. My lawyer had arranged to have it removed. The cemetery caretaker stood nearby with his tools waiting respectfully. Emily held my hand. She looked at her own name carved in stone. "That's weird," she said. I let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "Yeah, baby, it is. Are we leaving her here?" I knelt beside her, my knee complaining the whole way down. "No," I said, "we're leaving the lie here. You and me, we're going home." The caretaker removed the stone slowly. No music, no crowd, no speech. Just the sound of metal dirt and the end of something cruel. Emily slipped her hand into mine again. This time she held tight. I used to think strength meant surviving anything without breaking. Now I think strength is knowing when to stop carrying what was never yours to carry. Daniel stole a year from us, but he did not get the rest of our lives. If this story touched you, thank you for listening. Leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight. And if you believe in justice, family, and second chances, I'd be honored to have you here for the next